Episode 4. Bibi Goes Whole Hog. Call to hunt. Incensed, Alex stormed into the library. His father sat at his desk polishing his hunting horn. "Father, you're not serious, are you? You're really going through with this?" "Through with what?" Count Falco replied. He obviously did not want to be disturbed, but continued polishing calmly. Alex shouted, "With hunting the wild boars. I just spoke to Tina." "I will give the signals for the hunt, if that's what you mean," his father explained gracefully. Count Falco gave his horn a test blow. One might say he needed more than a little practice, as the squeaking sound it emitted was intolerable. Alex snorted. "What difference does it make?" The Count looked at his son, stunned, and stood up. "My dear boy," he exclaimed, approaching him majestically. "It's not the first time wild pigs have destroyed the harvest, which means less food for the other animals. The wild pigs are a plague. It's about the protection of nature and species, about care and maintenance. I, for one, will not relieve myself of my own noble duties. You could take an example from this young Spaniard, you know." Alex interrupted him, astonished. "What? Why?" Count Falco nodded. "Because then you would also understand that I have no other choice." "One always has a choice, father." With that, Alex left his father and hastened out of the library. Always open to new ideas. Bibi and Tina had taken over the task of looking after the small animals. Bibi poured grains into the chicken's food bowl, but her mind was somewhere else. She suddenly hollered out, "We can't just sit here and wait for them to start hunting." Tina shrugged resignedly. "Alex's father will go through with it for certain, no matter what we say. You know him." She followed Bibi, who was leaving the enclosure, trying to ignore her friend's response. "How can Chico be of the same opinion as the Count?" she cursed, seemingly more agitated than only moments ago. "Nature conservation. Bah! You know, if man had never interfered with nature in the first place, it would never have been so out of balance." She stomped furiously on the rabbit hutch and waited for Tina to open it so she could feed the little rabbit some fresh lettuce. "Oh, he gets on my nerves. I'll turn into a wild boar myself," continued Bibi. That seemed to give her an idea. Tina eyed her questioningly. "Bibi?" Bibi shouted, "Of course!" She knew what to do now. "We still have time to communicate with the wild pigs. There must simply be another solution, and it's not so hard to bewitch an animal now." Tina looked at her skeptically. "But have you ever done this before?" "I'm always open to new things," Bibi replied casually. By the way she grinned, Bibi clearly seemed delighted by the thought alone. Meanwhile, Roger was getting ready for a meeting with Kim Win-Win at the house. He had styled himself unusually chic, humming to himself while standing before the mirror with great anticipation, closing the last buttons of his collared shirt. Standing there, with his own reflection, he had the courage to tell Kim Win-Win everything he wanted to say. He dreamed of showing her everything on Martin's farm, even though he knew that the young woman was less interested in all of that than in a signed contract. Nevertheless, he trotted off in good spirits, past Bibi and Tina, who had just arrived at Her Highness's house. Frowning, Tina glanced at her conspicuously stylish brother. "Hey, Roger, got a date?" "Business, sis," Roger replied, not caring to reveal his mission. Vendetta against a few poor pigs? Freddy and his two bandmates, Henk and Klops, had been invited as special guests in the Radio Flamingo studio. Alex had finally given them the chance to present their summer hit. All three wore leather aprons like real blacksmiths and had set up their percussion tools and instruments in the studio. "Welcome to Radio Flamingo," Alex announced. "We're ad-free, unbiased, and impeccable. Today, I have someone here as my guest, whom I have known for quite a long time. And he brought some musician friends with him, with whom he will perform his brand new song live. Freddy, maybe you want to introduce yourself?" Freddy bent over the microphone. "Yeah, Hey, we're Freddy and the Blacksmiths. So, Freddy and the Blacksmiths, Alex repeated for emphasis. And we're hammering hard, Klops added. And as if on cue, Hank hit a metal bucket with his hammer several times. Alex jumped at the unexpected tonal shock. Funky threw off her headphones with one violent jerk, unprepared for the loud hammer hit. Who the heck did the intern bring along this time? Alex attempted to restart the conversation. Speaking of heavy, there's supposed to be a hunt in Falkenstein today. One could almost think that someone is leading a very personal revenge campaign against a few poor pigs. What do you say to that? Well, I mean, they always say that they're protecting nature, but, Freddy began. Hank added, I think they just want any excuse to shoot up the place. And Klops topped them. Exactly, that's so cruel. Those pigs. This, in turn, enraged Count Falco, who had just put one arm into his hunting jacket. Attack me publicly like this. Ethelbert, who was helping him dress, endeavored to correct him gently. Well, he didn't mention your name, and if I may say so, sir, you were quite critical of the hunt too at Alexander's age. He carefully brushed the last fluff from Falco's shoulders when the Count looked at him in astonishment. Ethelbert cleared his throat. You once even cried, sir, when you witnessed the wild boar hunt. Count Falco hastily interrupted him. I don't want to be reminded of that. And to this day you've never picked up a gun yourself. Ethelbert couldn't resist. Count Falco was outraged. Do you want to embarrass me now, too? A hunt always has a purpose, and what's the point of these so-called summer hits? Utter malarkey, I call it, that my son is so badly brainwashed. There was a knock at the door. Count Falco called. Come in. It was Chico. He entered, visibly excited, wearing a hunting outfit that resembled Count Falco's, and took off his cap as a greeting. Count Falco nodded his head in delight. Fortunately, there are still young people who set the right priorities. Chico, I'm delighted that you accepted my invitation to the hunt. Ethelbert appeared undecided as to what to make of this unexpected appearance. Was Alex to be replaced by this young man simply because he wouldn't go on the hunt? Chico made a grateful gesture. Count Falco, it is a great honor for me. The Count smiled and said, The honor is all mine. 3 is never a crowd. Bibi and Tina had ridden to the cornfield. They left Sabrina and Amadeus standing at the edge of the field to graze and fought their way through a tall thicket of plants until arriving at a rather large, devastated area. Ah, sighed Bibi. They've been rampaging through here. Tina was worried. There weren't just 2, there must have been loads. Bibi was sure of her mission. We must prevent them from being shot. They must still be around here somewhere. Tina wasn't convinced. That's really dangerous. Bibi nodded confidently at Tina. What does my mom always say? Truly important matters are best handled face to face. She raised her hands quickly and chanted, Eeny, meeny, crooked twig, I shrink myself into a pig. Whiz, whiz. All at once, a brown-spotted guinea pig with a red bow on its head perched on a ball on the ground. Tina laughed. Oh, good. Guinea pigs are adorable. How are you going to catch a wild boar with those puny little legs? Bibi had already changed back. Tina was still grinning. But you were so cute. I am still a young witch, you know. Not all witches' spells are so readily available. Bibi clarified and tried another. Eeny, meeny, solo swine. The big pig is a friend of mine. Whiz, whiz. Now there was a big piggy bank on the ground. Tina stared at it in disbelief and had to laugh even more. Bibi changed back in a flash. She didn't want to give up just yet. She raised her arms again and shouted, Eeny, meeny, what a chore! Turn me into a wild boar! Whiz, whiz! Now it wasn't a wild boar sitting on the ground grunting, but a young domestic sow wearing golden earrings. Tina smiled. Well, almost. Pig Bibi stomped through the cornfield grunting. Now all she had to do was find her almost mates. Tina's laughter subsided. She's really serious about this, and ran excitedly alongside the piggy. A no is not forever. Roger could see Kim Win-Win from a distance as he rode past the church towards the market square. She was sitting at a small table in front of the ice cream parlor, taking notes. Kim Win-Win only noticed him when he sat down across and greeted her. "Hello." Kim looked up at him with friendly anticipation. "And?" Her curiosity about whether or not Roger had achieved anything with the gravel was nearly palpable. But Roger shook his head regretfully. "Well, the offer was unfortunately declined by the family council. My mother wants to keep the pasture for our horses, and now I have to go see how I get money for feed." Kim Win-Win threw him a surprised glance. "Too bad." Then she smiled knowingly. "But why didn't you just call?" "I preferred to tell you in person," Roger admitted. The young woman smiled. "A no is not forever," she said. The waitress put a large hot fudge sundae on the table, 3 colorful ice cream scoops in a gondola shell, 1 lotus plate. Roger looked up in amazement. "We didn't order that." "Oh yes, we did," Kim Win-Win contradicted. "1 scoop for me, and the rest for you." The waitress lit the pink decoration on the sundae, which, to their surprise, opened like a lotus flower. Kim Win-Win handed Roger a spoon and smiled modestly. "You know, I really like how loyal you are to your family. I don't see mine that often. Today, Falkenstein, tomorrow Norway, next week New York." Roger swallowed. You're going to Norway tomorrow?" She shrugged her shoulders. "Roger, you have to think outside the box. Home is where my business is." Roger stared at her with fascination. "I hear it's very beautiful, Norway." Kim Win-Win smiled at him knowingly. Roger also smiled, although once again it wasn't quite clear to him what was going on in her head. Hunter's Salute. Several viewing posts were set up by the long side of the cornfield. The hunters had gathered on the hill. Count Falco and Chico had also arrived. The Count had shouldered his hunting horn and seemed a little nervous. Next to him stood the mill farmer, complaining. In the distance, one could see the destroyed area that Bibi and Tina had already discovered. "The corn is in great shape. All this exaggeration," contradicted the Count. "That's why we're hunting now. You're just speculating on higher compensation." He cleared his throat and turned to the other hunters. "Dear friends of nature, welcome to the hunt at Falkenstein. The hunters will come from above and keep the wild pigs in front of them. On both sides of the field there are high lookout towers. You drive them in our direction, and we'll hold them there." Chico listened to him in admiration. Count Falco seemed to know how best to do it. "A classic method," Count Falco explained further, "but with the Falkenstein variation. We will surprise and encircle them." He signaled by putting a finger to his lips. Silence befell the crowd. Then the Count whispered, "I wish you all good luck. Happy hunting." The other hunters answered in chorus, "Happy hunting!" Then moved to the edge of the field to wait for their cue. The Count walked with Chico towards their designated lookout. Acknowledging his young companion, he surveyed him and said, "Alexander's clothes fit you really well." Chico smiled happily. "Gracias." Indeed, he looked quite sharp in the crisp white shirt, chic vest, and tasteful tie. "He wouldn't wear them anyway," said Count Falco. "And they are completely silent." "Pardon?" asked Chico, perplexed. The clothes," explained the Count. "How perfect hunting clothes should be." He was suddenly distracted as he heard a noise and spotted, from the corner of his eye, how a wild boar was moving across the field. "Right under my nose! They want to provoke me!" he shouted excitedly. Chico tried to calm him down, but to no avail. The Count positioned his rifle and aimed at the cornfield. "But not with me! That's what you thought! that you would just dash out of here like that, but not on my watch, not with Falco von Falkenstein." And all at once, the Count, albeit rather clumsily, launched himself off into the thick mesh of cornstalks and disappeared. Chico could only make out his cursing voice. The Count had lost his orientation in the tall, dense growth. He looked to the right, then off to the left and swallowed. The wild boar's grunting was still audible, and the Count was seized by panic. He cried helplessly, "Hello? Hello?" Then he heard noises again. "Don't shoot!" he shouted. But it was only Chico who managed to lead the seemingly distraught Count back out of the field. Hunting fever. Meanwhile, Tina waited nervously for Bibi. She heard a low, guttural snort resonate behind her, and a second later, Bibi appeared. She actually looked like always, only her face was smeared with dirt. Tina called out in relief, "Bibi, finally!" "That was so incredible," Bibi replied enthusiastically. Tina turned up her nose. "You smell horrible." "Why?" asked Bibi. "It's only natural. Besides, if you only knew what a whole pack of wild boars smells like. Whoa! Anyway, they told me—" Tina laughed at this. "Told?" Bibi grinned. "Sure, wild boars are totally open." She was about to continue when the sound of a hunting horn interrupted her. Tina pulled Bibi to the ground so no one could see her. While the Count blew his horn incessantly, Bibi whispered to Tina, "In any case, wild boars are totally open and intelligent. They communicate with lots of different grunts. Even a domestic pig understands them, and they told me that they can't find enough food anymore." Tina nodded. "And so they ran into the cornfield." Bibi also nodded. "Exactly, and when I told them about the hunt, they weren't afraid at all. They got really angry. And do you know how dangerous wild boars are when they get really angry? I have to get them out of here. I just hope that they'll listen to me." The two of them rose up carefully to get an overview of the hunting party, still camouflaged behind the tall plants. "The hierarchy in the pack is truly amazing," Bibi explained further. "They do everything that the leader grunts." When they looked out across the field, the two girls discovered Count Falco high up in the lookout seat. And who was standing next to him? "Chico!" cried Tina in disbelief. The two girls thought it must be an illusion. "My word, he's not ashamed of anything," snorted Bibi angrily. At the same time, Alex presented the song of Freddy's band back in the studio at Radio Flamingo. And now, live at Radio Flamingo, it's Freddy and the Blacksmiths. The first bar sounded. Alex handed the stage over to the band and gave Funky Farnsworth a signal. "All right," he said, "I've got to run. The hunt is on." Funky looked at him in surprise. "I thought you were against the hunt." Alex answered grimly, "That's exactly why I'm going." And as soon as he had left, the band really took off. Hank and Klops hammered on the anvils, and Freddy positively shredded the guitar strings. Fitting for a day of hunting, they played their one and only song, Animal Kingdom. Meanwhile, the action over in the cornfield was gaining momentum. The hunters stood on their high seats and tensely scanned the field through their binoculars. The drivers in their orange vests began marching with their dogs, clapping their hands and shouting, "Chop, chop, holla, holla, wild boar, chop!" Bibi quickly changed herself into a pig again to resume the rescue operation. She took off through the field, fully aware of the many dangers. After all, her golden earrings were a giveaway as they glistened in the sun. Bibi in danger. Alex finally arrived on Maharaja at the cornfield. Not a second later, Tina bolted out onto the path. Alex brought his horse to a halt and shouted in surprise, "Where did you come from?" Tina told him to get off and follow her. Carefully, they turned the corner of the field and saw Chico standing in the high lookout tower next to his father. "Do you see that?" cried Tina in a panic. "And Bibi is in the cornfield as a wild boar, pig." Alex focused on Chico. Without breaking his glare, he asked. "Tell me, is he wearing my clothes? He looks just like me." But Tina was already pushing him towards the tower. "Go to your father. Do something quick." Alex snapped to, realizing the urgency of the situation. He ran to the lookout while Tina turned around again and hiked through the cornfield to find Bibi. Count Falco peered intently through his binoculars. At once he thought he saw something. There! The white boar! The white boar! He had discovered the pale domestic pig, Bibi. The sight of the animal caused the Count once again to panic. "Shoot! Shoot!" he cried out. Alarmed by the shouting, the mill farmer, who was positioned with his hunting partner on another high tower next to Count Falco, pulled the trigger and fired into the air. Bang! Astonished, the mill farmer and his hunting partner watched with mouths agape as Count Falco, together with his rifle, tumbled down out of his high perch to the ground below. "The Count's gonna be seeing little white piggies," the hunter joked. "You know, when he was little, a wild boar actually once ran right over him," the mill farmer pompously added. It seemed there was some truth in Ethelbert's story after all. Bibi finally crossed Tina's path and transformed back into herself, but still with the sweet little pig nose left over from her animal form. "I've spoken to the leading boar and promised her that they can leave the cornfield unharmed," she cried excitedly. "We must distract the hunters. Come." Count Falco lay motionless beside one of the support legs of the lookout tower. Fortunately, he hadn't broken anything. He rose up sportily on his feet and sought to cover up the incident with good spirits. "That went well, no?" He thanked Chico, who gave him his hand to climb up. Alex had meanwhile also reached the tower and looked up at the two of them. "Father, you have to stop this! Stop it now!" His father looked down at him, dismayed. Alex pointed to the cornfield. "Bibi and Tina are out there, in the cornfield!" Chico jumped up with alarm. "Que? You're only saying that because you're against this hunt," the Count replied angrily. Alex shouted, "No, I'm not joking!" But the Count was not so quick to give in. "Now listen to me, Alexander." Alex cut his father off angrily. He had to stop the hunt. "Father, please! My girlfriend and Bibi are in that cornfield which you are shooting at!" His father shouted back, "Yes, you already said that!" Alex was desperate. "Are you listening to me?" Then he turned to Chico, who followed the argument between father and son with bewilderment. "Abort!" Chico called out, grabbing the hunting horn and blowing into it forcefully. The instrument emitted an awful, pitiful roar that rattled through Count Falco's bones. The other hunters also heard it and lowered their rifles in confusion. Bibi, who had walked with Tina to the edge of the cornfield, now had an idea to really baffle the hunters. Breaking into a full-speed run, she raised her hands and said, "Eeny, meeny, fair and fine, overhead a floating swine, whiz, whiz." Suddenly, an oversized pig appeared in the sky. Everyone's attention was diverted upwards. The wild boars were to use this moment for a quick escape through a narrow path bordering the forest. Bibi screamed and waved. "Whoa! Check out the big pig in the sky!" Tina also pointed upwards. "A flying swine!" The Count was now also transfixed by the giant airborne animal, but he didn't think it was the least bit funny. "Bibi, stop this nonsense! This is a serious hunt!" And while all the hunters and drivers looked up to the sky in amazement, the wild boars easily escaped from the field unnoticed. Chico pressed the hunting horn into the Count's hand and quickly climbed down to Alex. The two boys hugged each other under the eyes of Count Falco. The end of the hunt seemed to be sealed. In an attempt to regain authority, the Count shouted, "All gather at the meeting place! Everyone!" Relieved, Bibi and Tina fell into each other's arms. They were wildly excited that everything had turned out well. Tina giggled as she pointed to Bibi's dainty pig nose. Seems like something got a bit stuck. Bibi wanted to know how it looked. Bibi, you always have a good nose, Tina said. Miss Bibi. The two girls sauntered confidently over to Alex and Chico, who immediately took note of Bibi's nose. The young Spaniard sniffed at her and grinned. Ooh la la! Old sweat? I didn't know you used men's perfume. Bibi shrugged. Miss Bibi. She lost interest in the jokes. A shower was waiting for her on Martin's farm, and the important thing was that the pigs were saved. Chico smiled and apologized. Seriously, disculpa. It was a huge mistake that I took part in that. I think it's great how you solved it in your own way. What's more, I can smell you quite well. You with your cute little pig nose. This last comment embarrassed Bibi a bit. Count Falco joined them and asked, Bibi, tell me, are the wild boars still there? In the field, scot-free? Bibi shook her head. No, they're all in the forest. I talked to them, and luckily, they listened to me. Count Falco decided to make good news of it. Well then, all in all, a successful hunt. The wild boars have returned to their forest where they belong, and the cornfield is saved. The mill farmer had a different opinion. You call that successful? Count Falco nodded. Yes. The mill farmer snorted. You call for a great hunt, and in the end not a single game is brought down. Then you fall from your post out of fright? You call that a success? My goodness, man, you're making a fool of yourself. Bibi had enough of the mill farmer's constant complaining. She raised her hands quickly and spoke. Eeny meeny, radio funky, cowards look out, Spaniard spunky, losers luck now dance, monkey, whiz whiz. All at once, a little monkey sat chirping on the shoulder of the mill farmer's hunting partner. Everyone laughed, but before anyone else could complain, Bibi called out, And now back to Martin's farm at breakneck speed. Bibi, Tina, Alex, and Chico galloped happily across the field to the stables. In high spirits, Bibi, who rode ahead, shouted, "Wanna bet I win? Go, Sabrina! Yeah!" Amadeus soon raced by her at lightning speed. But without Tina, Bibi was frightened. Where was Tina? What happened to her best friend?